Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We're here to talk about a game that landed on the Nintendo Switch with very little fanfare. It came out 4 days ago as I record this, and it's called Mercenaries Rebirth, Call of the Wild Lynx. Now, I didn't know that this game was on its way. I believe there was a press release that was put out, I just missed it. So when I saw it on the Switch eShop, I was surprised, but it was a pleasant surprise because this is actually the 5th title in the series on the Switch, and I have enjoyed the previous 4. So if you haven't played them before, there is the Mercenaries Saga Chronicles, or Mercenary Chronicles Saga. I can't remember the exact order of the words, but that came out as a 3-pack with the first 3 games in the series. And then the 4th one, which I can't remember the subtitle to, came out a little bit later on as a separate release. These are by no means the great games that are going to define the genre or video games as a whole. You're not going to give them Game of the Year awards. And in a year that's been absolutely loaded with excellent quality games, it would be very easy to overlook this one. But I recommend you don't, especially if you did have fond memories for the tactics RPGs on the GBA, whether that is Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, the Ogre Battle Tactics game, Tactics Ogre, what was the other one? Onimusha Tactics. If you enjoyed any of those on the GBA and you're old enough to remember them and you have a nostalgia for them, then the Mercenaries games actually tap into that really effectively. And like I said, they're not the world's greatest games. They're not going to be particularly memorable. I can barely remember the titles of them. But while you're playing them, you will really enjoy them. And of course, they're not expensive. You know, they're not premium priced games, so you'd get a lot of content for your money's worth, but you are going to enjoy your time while you're playing them, and that's the point I want to get across with this video. I want to highlight that the games are out. I do have a review on digitallydownloaded.net as well that you can check out, but I just wanted to encourage people to check it out if you may have otherwise missed it. See, the thing is, we don't get that many tactics RPGs anymore, and I'm not entirely sure why, because the genre itself is well liked. And there are a lot of people I know who are not necessarily big fans of RPGs and JRPGs, but you put a tactics RPG in front of them and they really enjoy it and have a good time and have fond memories of growing up playing these games. I know plenty of people, for example, that love or don't really love Final Fantasy. They love Final Fantasy Tactics. And of course, Square Enix hasn't produced a new Final Fantasy Tactics game in a very, very long time. In fact, as I sit here and talk and think, the only tactics RPG I can think of that is on the Switch that came out of Japan is God Wars. And I'm sure there'll be people in the comments that tell me the other ones that I've missed. But the fact that I can only think of one off the top of my head, and I am a fan of this genre, goes to show just how niche the tactics RPG genre has become. And like I said, I'm not entirely sure why. I certainly think that there's a lot of work that goes into a tactics RPG, because you do have a lot of units to manage, and all of those units have a lot of statistics to manage, and if you get things wrong even slightly, you can actually break the game. In fact, even the best examples of the tactics RPG are susceptible to being broken. There are all kinds of exploits in Final Fantasy Tactics, for example, Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced, that make the game just ridiculously easy, and once you work those out, it's almost no point to kind of play it. There's combinations of characters and items and stuff that make Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced just too easy. And that is one of the very best examples of the genre. So you can imagine how hard developers need to think in order to get the balancing right in these games. But with that being said, RPGs and JRPGs themselves can have exactly the same problem. And if you're not very careful with how you balance those, they can also become very unentertaining. So I don't think that's the reason that stops developers from making them. I honestly do not know, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts in the comments as to why you think that there aren't that many tactics RPGs anymore. Perhaps it's just that they're too slow-paced, and even the turn-based RPGs these days, from the likes of Gust and whatever, feel the pressure to be much more action-focused, whether it's just a visual presentation or it is actually they've become more action-based. There is this effort to put a lot more energy into these games, and perhaps you can't really do that with a tactics RPG. Perhaps that is simply the reason that we don't see many of them anymore. But anyway, point being, Mercenaries is one of those games. Now, there are a couple of things you need to be aware of going in. Firstly, they are not the best balanced games out there. and they do tend to veer towards being too difficult. So, for example, Mercenaries Rebirth, as you play it through, you will realize that the recommended level for each battle in the main story quest is by no means the actual level your characters should have. So if the battle says that your recommended level is 6, you probably want to grind your characters up to 7 or 8. Now, I think that is deliberate because these games are based in mobile land, and because they're based in mobile land, the developers need to do something to encourage you to play longer and spend more, obviously. There are no microtransactions in the Switch version of the game, but the balancing issues remain there, I think. So I think that's where that comes from. But other than that, you're in for some very classical tactics RPG action in playing these. And the graphics are lovely. The presentation is quite nice. The original Mercenaries titles, if you buy that collection of 3 games that I mentioned earlier, the first 3, they are very primitive in terms of how they look. But you get to this one and you've got these really nice character portraits. You've got these really nice battlefields that are quite large in size. The pixel art in the characters for the sprites are quite nice, and the variety of characters is good as well. It's by no means anything that is going to be blowing you away. It's not that kind of game, but within the kind of the boundaries of what these games try to do, they're just pleasant. And this one tells a perfectly pleasant story. It is a little bit juvenile in its writing at times, but it tells you the story of a princess who is very pretty, very pretty princess indeed. She is being hunted by her stepmother, who wants to put her son on the throne, and to do so she needs to get rid of the princess. So we're talking about a very fairy tale style plot there. They run into this mercenary who's gruff but has a heart of gold, another kind of cliche, and they go on this adventure together where they start out with very low level missions as a mercenary company, but eventually grow in stature and become much more important and powerful and start to take on more difficult missions and of course catch the eye of the stepmother. So we are talking about a very cliched story here. It doesn't try and break with those cliches. It's not trying to be subversive. It's not trying to be clever. It's just trying to be this classic tactics RPG game for people that like tactics RPG games. And there is something there for people. You know, we often, including me as a game critic, we often look for games or elevate games that try and do things that are kind of special, because we're constantly talking about how important innovation is. We want to highlight the games that push the medium forward. We want to be challenged in terms of the ideas and whatever we experience. But in doing so, we can sometimes lose sight of the quality of the basics. Where a game that just focuses on the very simple basics of the genre can still be a great way to spend some time. And in some ways, I think the release timing of this Mercenaries Rebirth has been really good for the game and the company. We have just had some absolutely massive games release on the Switch in terms of the RPG genre. And just going back the last couple of weeks in terms of what I've played, it has been Shin Megami Tensei, it has been Pokemon, it has been Blue Reflection, there has been Caligula Effect. It has just been this series of RPGs that I haven't had a chance to come up and really breathe. And all of those RPGs have had that kind of extra X factor that I like to talk about with my games. You know, Shin Megami Tensei is this really powerfully dark and very intelligent game. Blue Reflection is this really gorgeous, ethereal, beautiful game. Caligula Effect is just raw intelligence. You know, all of these RPGs that I've been playing have had qualities that talk to me as a kind of art, and they're artistic experiences. Pokemon's a little bit different, but the other ones have all been these really engaging, deep, rich experiences. And coming off of those, having something like Mercenaries Rebirth that just reminds me of what I love about the gameplay of this genre of RPGs, and what I loved about these games when I was younger. And I wasn't really studying the plot as I was playing them. I was just moving from event to event, enjoying the graphics, enjoying the kind of the turn-based combat and all that. Having a game that just reminds me of the basis of the genre that I love so much has been really nice. I have not regretted finding this game on the Switch, downloading it and playing it at all. Okay, so that's enough for this video. Like I said, it was a short one. I don't have that much to talk about with this game. I kind of covered it all in the video. But if you want to read a little bit more about it, check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net to run through all my usual bits and pieces. If you have enjoyed this video, please do click that like and subscribe button. That way you will not miss out on any others as I publish them. And if you want to support what I'm doing here at digitallydownloaded.net, please do consider backing me on Patreon. You can do so very cheaply for just $1 a month or more if you're feeling generous. And in doing so, not only do you help me grow this channel and the work that I'm doing on Digitally Downloaded itself, but you also get a 48-page monthly magazine which goes in depth into all kinds of things to do with Japanese art and culture, not just video games, but also literature and music and film and history and culture and food and drinks and all of the rest of it. So if you're into your Japanese art and culture, then this magazine is for you. And that is a bonus for just backing me on Patreon on any level, even $1 a month. All right, thanks very much as always for tuning in, and we will see you at the next video.